It's the Inside Scoop Virginia, all the news Virginians want to know. Now here's the host of Inside Scoop Virginia, George Burke.
Good evening. Welcome to Inside Scoop Virginia. My guest tonight is Dan Drummond. Dan's an old friend, and he's running for Fairfax City Council. It is his first run for that position. Dan has a lot of experience in state and local government. Like me, many, many moons ago, he was a reporter, and we all bit our teeth on local government. He's a senior vice president with Powell Tate Public Affairs. If you don't know the company, Jody Powell was Jimmy Carter's press secretary, and Sheila Tate worked for the Reagan administration in the White House. He's the former communications director for Congressman Jim Moran. And all those positions, he certainly had a lot to do with state and local government. He's a member of Fairfax City's Economic Development Authority. He served on their Parks and Recreation Board. And of course, he lives in Fairfax City with his wife, Carrie, and 3 children. There are 11 candidates in this race for 6 positions. 4 of them are incumbents. And Dan threw his hat in the ring, I don't know, a month and a half ago, I guess. And here he is. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thanks a lot for having me, George. I appreciate it.
This is your first run for elective office, I take it?
It certainly is.
Yeah.
And looking forward to it.
You seem to be doing the right things. You certainly have enough experience knowing how these races run to figure out how to do it. Let me hit you with the question that every candidate gets right off the bat. Why are you running for Fairfax City Council?
It's pretty simple. This is the community that I call home, the city that I love. My wife and I came here in 2000 after I came up from Norfolk, Virginia, where I grew up, went to Old Dominion University. My grandfather was in the FBI for 25 years and was in law enforcement for about 50. My mom was a public school teacher. And when I got to the city, I realized this was a unique place. It had a distinctiveness. It was a place where you could call home because it had a small town charm. And that's one of the reasons I'm running. I want to make sure, with all due respect to my fellow jurisdictions, that we don't blend into the Northern Virginia scenery and that we retain that unique historic charm that makes the city special. And quite frankly, as we're facing some economic headwinds, that distinctiveness will ensure that our economic viability stays ahead.
It's a pretty town, and it certainly has that small town charm. I mean, there's parts of it that if you don't know it, you don't know if, you go along Arlington Boulevard to what's now Fairfax Boulevard. There's not a lot of change there unless you know that you're coming into the city.
Right.
But certainly when you take any of those lefts and head towards Old Town, you know you're in a different place. And until recently, it was also the seat of Fairfax County's government. Now that they built the government center, that's changed a little bit, but you still have all of our courthouses and a lot of the other things there. Talk to me a little bit about how you believe your experience as a reporter, as someone who lives and breathes state and local affairs in your current position, and certainly as someone who worked for Jim Moran, who had to deal with many of these issues as well. How does that experience dovetail with this city council position?
It's funny that you mentioned state and local experience, because my service to the city actually started when I was a little kid. My grandfather was number 17 on the Newport News Police Department, and he was one of the first people to come to the department and start to walk the docks and really try to make an impact in this community. That's what I'm trying to do here. I want to make an impact in the community and move the city forward. And I think I do have that kind of experience, whether it's within the city, within the region, the state level, or even at the federal level. I can go and have conversations with my peers to get things done. I'm a pragmatic kind of guy. At the end of the day, I'm not about rhetoric or just talk. I want to make sure we have action. And one of my political heroes is Teddy Roosevelt. And one of the reasons I like Teddy is because he was an actual-oriented guy, but he was also deliberative. He wanted to make decisions that were not just made for 5, 10 years from now, but also for 20, 30 years from now. This kind of generational decisions that we're going to have to make in the city. Take Route 50, for example. It's undergoing a complete redevelopment. We need to make sure that corridor, which is our economic backbone, remains our economic backbone for generations to come. So especially when we're facing economic headwinds, there's a temptation sometimes to go for the revenue and to go for the easy win. But what we really need to do is we need to make sure that we're making decisions that will preserve the city's historic and environmental resources and treasures, quite frankly, for the many years to come. As far as experience, I do have that kind of experience that I think is very unique to the challengers that are in this race. For example, serving with Congressman Jim Moran, I worked with Congressman Davis and Congressman Wolf's office on a lot of regional issues that are very, very important, such as Dulles Rail. Being communications director, I was very familiar with a lot of the issues that circulate around this region. Interestingly enough, one of the things that I found is when I was doing my research, when I was going to decide to run for this race, is I looked up an article that I had written when I was with the Washington Times from November 2000. And it was about 3 weeks after the city of Fairfax had a bond referendum to provide a percentage of their tax revenue to go to preserving open space. That was a major initiative that the city of Fairfax led that other jurisdictions have either not filed suit or have been slow to file suit. So that is the kind of innovative thinking that I think Fairfax City is known for, whether it's providing all-day kindergarten for children, or Latin for children in its schools, or just the trash and recycling pickup that we have that communities around the region would love to have. We have that kind of forward thinking that I want to continue and keep steady forward.
Fairfax City, you have economies of scale because you have a smaller jurisdiction. It's sometimes maybe a little easier to implement some of these programs that in a county like Fairfax with 1.1 million people may take a little longer. So you're almost like a laboratory there in Fairfax, and people can watch and see what you do and see if it works, and then see whether it can be done on a broader scale. Fairfax City is a really nice community. It has small town charm. But like other Northern Virginia jurisdictions, it's got its issues, it's got its problems. What do you see are the major problems in Fairfax City? We'll start off on a negative rather than end on
Sounds
a
good.
negative.
Start off with the hard stuff first. I like the fastballs and the curveballs rather than the softballs anyways. It's when you have challenges that are in front of you is when I think leaders of a jurisdiction and our elected leaders can really shine. And I think that experience that I have will combat those challenges, because at the end of the day I think challenges are opportunities. Look, there's no doubt that we're facing a recession. We're facing a slowdown in housing. We're facing an economy that is because of the slowdown in housing, especially in this region, is going to face some headwinds. Having said that, the city is very unique in the sense that majority of our tax base actually does not come from residential personal property taxes. It actually comes from business, retail, and the commercial sector, which I think is very unique, and it's also very helpful too, because it kind of cushions the blow a little bit. Because if you have that, I think it's about 60% of our tax base is actually within that section, business, retail, and commercial. The tax burden is not necessarily have to be placed any more so on the residents of the city. And I think as we go forward in this tough economy, we're going to need to make sure that we make smart investments on the private side. As we talked about Route 50, for example, and even Old Town. Those are our economic backbones. We need those areas to thrive, because if they don't thrive, then the residents are going to be paying more in taxes, and we certainly don't want that to happen. We want to make sure residents pay a fair tax, but we also want to make sure that as we go through this time where we do face a slowdown in housing, that doesn't necessarily mean that residents are going to have to pay overly burdensome tax rates because of that. And that's why I think making investments in economic development and for the growth of the long term of the city will actually benefit the short term.
So you definitely have to look at sustainable growth in terms of your business.
That's definitely true. And we also certainly have some of the issues of growth and development that many other communities in Northern Virginia have. Having said that, we have got 23,000 people within a 6 square mile radius. It's a pretty compact place. Like many great philosophers said, invest in invest in land because nobody else is making it anymore. And that's very true. We're actually having a debate right now about what is open space, for example. Is open space green space, or is open space mean athletic fields and facilities? And, like I said, I'm a guy that, like Governor Warner has always said before, I'm about the sensible center. I believe that we need to find a solution that's in the middle. I believe we need to preserve green space. But look, we've got a population that has a lot of young families coming in. We also have older residents who want to stay there. We need to provide programs and opportunities for them for the entire life cycle, whether you're entering the job market, raising a family, or whether you're retiring an empty nester, or anywhere in between. We've got a great senior center. We've also got great children's activities. We've also got great parks and recreational activities. And to me, for example, park and recreations is an economic development opportunity. People come to the city, they come to Van Dyke Park, they come to Radcliffe Park, they come to Green Acre Center because we've got those opportunities you can't find anywhere else in this region. So we need to make sure we preserve, enhance, and maintain those resources for the years ahead, because if we don't, then we're going to use our the sort of the chip, if you will, in terms of our distinctiveness among the region. So certainly the issue of growth and overgrowth and making sure we balance it is very important. That's why I think if you take a long-term perspective of growth and balance the needs economically with those of the needs to preserve your historic resources, which, as you know, we have many in this city, with your environmental resources, we'll be in a very good place to weather the economic storms, but also when the times are good, we'll be able to benefit from that bounty.
What type of business do you think is best to attract to Fairfax City? You don't have a lot of big box stores, right, so to speak. You have, you have Home Depot and you have what you'd expect, but you have a lot of medium-sized, the Hudson Trail Outfitters, those types of businesses that I've seen, certainly some car dealers, but a lot of nice little restaurants and stuff too. And what do you feel is the optimum type of business, particularly along Fairfax Boulevard and 29 and 50 there, where they...
Like you mentioned before, I do have a background in economic development, not just in Northern Virginia and Fairfax City, but also in Southwest Virginia. I serve on a couple different boards and commissions that focus on economic development. And the theories pretty much are the same. You want to find a good mix for that community when it comes to housing, when it comes to restaurants, when it comes to grocery stores, when it comes to retail, and also commercial. What kind of businesses do you have where people just go in and work? And I think what we want to find, especially Fairfax Boulevard, is we want to focus and make centers of community, or nodes, if you will, for where people can come, live, work, and play. Where you have a grocery store, we've got retail outlets, and you've got a mix there of small, medium, as well as some of the national brands that provide a level of trust and certainty for people. Because under economic development theory, what happens is when people come to, let's say, an Ann Taylor, they'll also go next door to the local mom and pop shop. So we want to make sure we've got a good balance of the kind of businesses. So I'm a huge supporter and proponent of small and medium-sized businesses thriving in the city, because if you don't have those, if you don't have those, then you sort of lose the heart of what you want to accomplish when you have a small town feel. People go to the Firehouse Grill and they go to All Jabeen downtown because those are small businesses, or they go to the Sweet Life Cafe because they want to get a treat because that's a small business. But we also have, Potbelly's has come in, which is a national chain, which everybody loves to eat. Got great sandwiches. We also would need to bring in more retail. So I certainly would like to bring in more retail, and I'm also encouraged. I also want to make sure we've got the right kind of housing opportunities. We need to have housing opportunities for people both, who are young, who are just entering the job market. But we also need to ensure that we focus on our established neighborhoods and protect those. That's just the neighborhood where I live, and it's about 50, 60 years old. We also need to make sure we've got housing stock for people who are, a little bit older and more seasoned, if you will, because they want to live in the city. And we're finding that we're getting that kind of mix. But we need to make sure that mix is done in a very balanced way, preserves our historic and environmental resources, but at the same time, enables us to move the city forward.
We encourage you to call in if you have any questions for Dan at 571-749-1166. My name is George Burke. I'm the host, and we'll see you back here in 2 minutes. Thanks for watching.
How far would you go to help someone? Would you go to the end of your driveway? Would you cross a street? Would you cross an ocean? To a place 6,000 miles from home? And how long would you go? Would you go for a week? A month? A year? Would you go for 2 years? Would you go if you could use your knowledge to teach someone, and in the process, maybe learn something yourself? Life is calling. How far will you go? Peace Corps.
James, don't forget your helmet.
Will do.
Not a helmet. Your bike helmet.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm James Thrash with the Washington Redskins. On the football field, a helmet is an important piece of equipment. I also wear another helmet that's just as important. A bike helmet. It's the most important piece of equipment you'll have the next time you're out on your bike. Wear yours and make sure your kids do too. Safety first with the Skins.
Monica and her friends want you to know that you should never get near a dog when it is eating, playing with a favorite toy, or sleeping. It's really important to make time for exercise and games and keep your dog's vaccines up to date. Never leave a dog in a small, confined space. This can make dogs aggressive like Monica. If you follow this advice, you and your dog can play safely and happily together.
It's the Inside Scoop Virginia. All the news. Now back to the Inside Scoop Virginia. Call in live and let your host be heard. Here again, your host, George Burke.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop Virginia. My guest today is Dan Drummond. He's running for Fairfax City Council. As I mentioned earlier, there are 11 candidates seeking 6 positions. They are nonpartisan positions, so they do not run as Democrats or Republicans. And in fact, my experience, Dan, is that everybody seems to get along pretty well on this city council.
For the most part, yes. I think for the most part, people do get along because we want to move the city forward. We want to make sure that city residents get quality government. Having said that, you know, I've knocked on about 700 doors so far since the beginning of February. And one of the things I have heard is they want to see a change in the city in terms of the dialogue that takes place. They want to make sure that they know that their input is listened to. They want to make sure that when the boards and commissions that we have, which we have many of, which is fantastic, that the counsel that they give to the city council is taken in and that it's reflected by the policies for which the city council makes. So while, yes, they get along by and large, you know, certainly there's always some tension on certain issues, but I come into this not running against anyone or anything, but I come into this running for something, and that is I'm running to be a city council member for the people of Fairfax. At the end of the day, it's their city council. This is their campaign, this is their city, and they need to take it, they need to own it. And that's one of the great things about the city. You know, if you look at people who've lived in the city for a very long time, you find their families come back. For example, let's take our good friend, Senator Chet Peterson. His family has been there for many, 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 many years. And, you know, one of the special things about the city is that he's grown up in like Chap and many others, they've grown up through the school system, they've gone off and gone to college, but they come back, they buy a home, they start the family over again. Mm-hmm. It's very unique to this city, and I think, and it's something that, you know, I think is very special. It's the reason that Carrie and you know, my daughter Sadie and my son Patrick and my son Liam, we all love living there. I mean, there isn't a day that doesn't go by where we can't take a walk down the street and see our neighbors and run into our friends' houses, or go down Van Dyke Park, or go down to Radcliffe Park, or go for a program at Green Acres. There are a lot of different things that we could do, and that's what I think is really special about this city, is a small town. You know, we also have a city that is growing in some ways, and there are probably, you know, 30 to 50 kids ages of 5 to 15 who are at a bus stop across the street from my house. I got a great corner lot, which is good for signs, but, you know, I also see all these kids, and I see the next generation of Fairfax City and Fairfax City leaders. And so I want to make sure that the next city council, which I intend to be on when people vote for me on May 6th, is that I want to make sure that it is a city council that gets along and goes along and makes sure it does right by the people of Fairfax. Because at the end of the day, it's not the council member city council. It is the citizens of Fairfax City Council.
You have a lot of citizen participation in Fairfax City?
Yes, we do. We have a lot of boards and a lot of commissions, ranging from Parks and Recreations Advisory Board to Commission on the Arts to an Arts Commission. We've got a lot of great arts and cultural activities there too. You know, one thing that's missing though is we don't have a Citizens Transportation Advisory Board. And obviously transportation and traffic issues are of a great concern to Northern Virginia. But in the city, you know, it's very unique. We've obviously got issues, you know, with the secondary roads, but the city controls its own roads. We're one of several jurisdictions in the Commonwealth do. The rest of the jurisdictions in Virginia, the Commonwealth and VDOT maintains the roads.
I want to get back to that, but we have a call right now from Fairfax, from Michelle. Michelle, are you there?
Yes, hi. I'm new to Fairfax County as part of the BRAC realignment. I was here for about 9 months now. And as you're aware, there's going to be quite a few other people that are coming based on the base closures into Fort Belvoir and DLA as well. My concern is that we have about a year to find housing, and a lot of the affordable housing is in areas that not really is desirable. So I'm wondering what's going on as far as planning for this new influx of people that are coming into the BRAC.
Well, we'll come back to transportation in a minute, but does Fairfax City have any affordable housing? It's awful tough to find that in Northern Virginia, period, these days.
Right. You know, housing in general in Fairfax City is much like the rest of Northern Virginia, specifically Fairfax County. I mean, if you look at the way Fairfax County and Fairfax City is shaped, we're sort of right in the middle with the courthouse. And, you know, as far as affordable housing goes, we do have a fairly good mix of apartments and townhouses, but it's mostly established neighborhoods such as Mosby Woods, Green Acres, Fairchester, you know, different neighborhoods. In terms of, you know, affordable housing, I think one of the things that we're going to see, at least from the city, is probably going to be reflective in the rest of the Northern Virginia region, which is that the economic reality is that housing prices are coming down, which will provide an opportunity for people to come in to buy housing. Having said that, though, there are also a lot of people who want to come in and buy upscale housing as well. And so that's one thing the city is trying to do, is trying to make sure we have that balance. With regard to BRAC, and I know Fairfax City is not directly impacted, but we do have a lot of military personnel and retired personnel, and people who are going to be affected by the base realignment closing, you know, obviously going to be affected, live in this city. One thing that we need to do, and actually kind of goes back to transportation, is make sure we are part of that Northern Virginia community to help prepare for those types of events that are going to occur. I come from Norfolk and Virginia Beach area. Large military presence. My grandfather used to walk the docks during World War II. Very familiar with the military. I very much respect the service that our fighting men and women give to this country. And we need to ensure at local government level that we do everything we can for the military when we can. And if it's helping them, you know, with just basically just getting to and from work sometimes, from transportation standpoint, I think that's a super help. So when it comes to BRAC, I hope Fairfax City will have a seat at the table along with Fairfax County and Arlington and others and in Prince William to make sure that we deliver a product. Because at the end of the day, people are making an investment in government, and we need to deliver to them a product that's going to kind of suit their needs, because it's going to be a big change. I think about 22,000 people that are going to be relocating. And you're going to have a huge dynamic shift in population. And, you know, that population comes you know, kids, it comes cars, and it comes various social needs. And Fairfax City is not an island to ourselves. Yes, we're very unique, but we also participate in the larger Northern Virginia community. And we need to make sure that we have a seat at the table when those decisions are made. And that's one thing I think I do bring to the table too, George, is that I do have that experience in the relationships which will ensure that.
I hope that answered your question, Michelle. I've got an odd question. I definitely want to spend a little more time on transportation because it's an issue that impacts all of us. But you guys have the 800, you're surrounded by the 800-pound gorilla. You're surrounded by the largest municipality in the Washington area, the largest municipality in Virginia, and if the statistics are correct, the wealthiest county in the nation. Now, not that Fairfax City is poor by any means. It's in many ways, in some ways, it's a smaller version of Fairfax County.
Right.
What kind of issues does a small city like Fairfax face when you're surrounded by the 800-pound gorilla?
That's a great question. That's a great question. It's both an area of challenge and opportunity, but it's also an area where I can actually point to some examples of where the relationships and the cooperation has worked. There is, in the middle of Old Town, a true gem. It is the $16 million library. It's the Fairfax City Regional Library. That was because of a cooperative effort between Fairfax County and Fairfax City. And those are the types of relationships that I think we need to continue and invest more of. Because that library is not just going to serve the wonderful citizens of Fairfax City, but it's going to serve the entire region. You know, Fairfax City is in the heart of Fairfax, and you're right, we are very much reflective of the county in a lot of respects, demographically, economically, traffic-wise, a lot of different things that we reflect.
Jerry Connolly was at your announcement party, and he noted that he shops. They go to the supermarket in Fairfax.
That's correct. But I think some of the challenges we face is actually we face challenges in terms of ensuring that the services that are provided to the city are such that they still maintain the high quality that we expect. And the city budget, for example, a good chunk of it goes to the school system. We have our own school board, but at the same time, we also work with the county to make sure that the curriculum is what we want. We have to make sure that the programs that are what we want, and by and large, we do that. And now that's for the school board. But at the same time, I think education and some of those other things that go into local government, the city council obviously has purview over. In terms of the county's relationship with the city, we also have a working relationship with the Community Services Board, for example. The social services net that we provide, that really comes from the county. It's kind of like a package of services. So we have to make sure that we tell them what we want and make sure that we can help shape that as much as we can. The other thing too is the city is from an economic development standpoint also needs to make sure that we are also working with the county, but recognize that we're competing with them too. And by that I mean that there's a beautiful Wegmans out there over in, I think it's Fairfax Circle, that a lot of city residents go to. We would love for people to come back into the city and shop there. So there's a lot of economic development we need to do that people make sure they come back in the city. But there is a couple ideas that I have specifically for the city work for to build a strong relationship with the county. The first is to get a seat on the Soil and Water Conservation Board. I've already spoken with Delegate David Bulova about this. In fact, it was his original idea, quite frankly, to get a seat on the Soil and Water Conservation Board because our water and our skies don't stop at city and county borders, and we need to make sure that we're protecting our environment in a holistic way. That requires an act of the General Assembly, and already I believe that is being worked on. The second thing is we don't have a consumer advocate right now in the city, is my understanding. We could possibly team up with the county to provide that sort of consumer advocate, such as they do, which I believe Delegate Bulova actually sat on the board for. So we actually have some opportunities to collaborate and work together because we'll be a much stronger city if we can collaborate. But at the same time, also recognize that there are areas where we're competing and that we need to do a good job of building a relationship where needed.
Yeah, I have some other questions about that. Obviously, I think the Sheriff's Department's in Fairfax and Fire and Rescue headquarters is, and the courthouses are. And I want to delve into that a little bit deeper. We will be back in 2 minutes. My guest today is Dan Drummond. He's running for Fairfax City Council. He certainly would have my vote if I lived in the city.
You can move there by April 4th and register if you want.
So you can vote. You can register by April 4th. See you in 2 minutes.
Go to jail for a gun crime, and your family serves a sentence with you.
I'm Bob Costas, and I've been broadcasting sports for a long time. Much of what I do is ad-libbed, but still one of the most important aspects of my job is being able to write. Narrations, essays, commentaries. It's essential to express those thoughts and concepts clearly and concisely. Good writing is essential for almost any career. And with today's advanced technology, the National Commission on Writing reports that the need to write well has never been more important. Writing is everybody's business.
Sure, my neighbors Jean and Louise, they may be superheroes with superpowers, but that doesn't make them so super at saving energy and money.
Honey,
I may not be able to harness the power of the elements, but I save significant cash and help the environment with appliances, electronics, and windows featuring the Energy Star label. So discover your own energy-saving superpowers. Go to ase.org/consumers.
Mom, Dad's making fondue again.
You got more to talk about the gym.
Now back to the Inside Scoop Virginia. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, George Burke.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop Virginia. My name is George Burke. I'm your host. My guest today is Dan Drummond, and Dan is running for Fairfax City Council. I guess it's just Fairfax City Council.
That's correct.
Or City of Fairfax
City of Fairfax. You say tomato, I say tomato.
Right, right. We were talking about transportation earlier. You started going into it before I rudely interrupted you. Let's delve into that a little bit. You know, one thing I have to say is during rush hour on the way home, I used to have my car serviced at a dealership in Fairfax City, and I can recall some times where it took me a long time to get from Merrifield to the dealership, which was sort of on the western side of the city. And so the problems in many ways are the same. And I've driven around Fairfax City quite a bit during rush hour. It's mainly your east-west arteries that are the biggest problem. You know, if you take the lefts and get onto some of the other streets, whether it's Chainbridge Road or whatever, they may move slow because obviously they're narrower, but they're moving all the time. There's no gridlock per se. But the Fairfax Boulevard corridor, Route 5029, and the 236 corridor, Little River Turnpike, it seems to me that you have the same problems as the county has on either side of the city.
Right.
How do you deal with it?
Well, let me start small.
Because that's a question that has been, that even our governors can't answer, so I'm putting you on the spot.
Let me see if I can figure it out. Governor Kane can't figure it out, I don't know if I can either. Yeah. But having said that, let me start small and then work up big. Mm-hmm. You know, at the end of the day, people are more concerned, I think, about traffic than anything else because it affects their quality of life from the time they leave their driveway to the moment they get on 236, for example, the time they get on the Beltway, the time they get into D.C. or to wherever else they go in Northern Virginia. You know, and like I said, I've knocked on about 700 doors so far. One of the things I keep hearing is people are concerned about traffic and really in their neighborhood. You know, they recognize, and they're smart enough to recognize that traffic and transportation issues cannot just be solved by the city. They have to be solved by working with the county, working with the Commonwealth, working with, to some extent, the federal government. And so one of the things I think we should focus on is trying to figure out how we can improve citizens and small businesses' lives within the city. So one idea is to create a Citizens Transportation Advisory Board. And this board would, like other boards and commissions that we have in the city, would be advisory in nature. And what it would do is provide an opportunity, provide a forum for people to come as citizens to be appointed by the council and also small businesses, small and mid-sized businesses in the city, and to talk about the issues related to traffic and transportation within the city, whether it's the need for a stop sign someplace, whether it's the need for traffic enforcement, whether it's the need for traffic mitigation in terms of controlling the flow of traffic. But also when we have major decisions to make, for example, around Main Street, when we had Old Town redevelopment, there was a lot of outreach, but there really doesn't seem to be one sort of place where people could go as an advisory board or commission. It's sort of a middle ground, if you will, between the staff and then between the city council and the mayor. So I would see that this advisory board would provide that forum so people could come and give their ideas, because I've heard some great ideas out there. Look, the reality of it is the citizens of Fairfax are going to hire me, and hopefully they won't ever fire me, but I want to listen to them. I want to make sure I've got their ideas, and because they're really good. Like, for example, I talked to one gentleman who lives in our neighborhood. He said, look, we've got a lot of cut-through traffic. Can we just put in some low-grade speed bumps? And I said, well, that sounds, it's like a pretty low-cost idea, but it's safety-minded too. Look, we've got a lot of little kids playing. Mm-hmm. We have older citizens. And frankly, if we want to have a city that is a walking city, we need to make sure that our communities and our neighborhoods embody what we want as a city. So going a little bit broader, at the county level, I know that 123 on 236 and Main Street and Fairfax Boulevard, we obviously go into the county and people use those as pass-throughs. When we look at economic development, we need to consider transportation solutions along with it. Can we do retiming of the lights? Can we put in can we moderate the speeds? Can we widen the roads in such a way that doesn't affect neighborhoods? Or when we redevelop, for example, Fairfax Boulevard, is there a way that we can actually ensure that we've got those nodes, like I mentioned before, of Camp Washington, North Fairfax, and Fairfax Circle, that then you have those, have a little bit more flow through. So when you come into the city, you obviously know you're in the city of Fairfax, but you also can go back and forth as you may need, as you please. Because it's going to be critical, George, that we have people coming to the city. I mean, it's in our own best interest that we have a transportation system in the city of Fairfax that works for people. Because if we don't have a transportation system that works for people, we're not going to get the kind of economic development we need to sustain our own economy and to move forward. So from a standpoint of the community as a whole, we really need to have a seat at that table. We already do have a seat in some places, but I think we can be a little bit more vocal. We're not an island unto ourselves. In some respects we want to be, but in other respects we can't be. And actually we cut our nose to spite off our face if we're not. So that's one thing I've heard, quite frankly, from some county officials too, is they would like to try and maybe play more of a part. And I think I've got those relationships that can help, because at the end of the day, it's the city of Fairfax voters who are going to elect me, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that they are represented. And the only way they can be represented is if we have a seat at the table and we're a strong advocate. Because at the end of the day, I'm about delivering a smart, effective, and accessible government for the citizens of Fairfax. They make an investment when they pay their taxes and they pay fees. They expect something in return. And I sort of see myself as being on a board of directors, if you will. And they're the shareholders, and they're giving us shareholder money. We need to make sure we're using that money in a way that is prudent, is wise, and makes investments for the long term.
So Fairfax City has a little more control over its destiny, at least in terms of its roads, than Fairfax County does. I believe Arlington also has control over its own roads. Is that an expensive proposition for the city? Do you receive a subsidy or some kind of a payment from the state in lieu of VDOT?
There's a formula. There are monies that are received, and for example, there's a road that's about to go under construction, George Mason Boulevard. That's a connection between George Mason University and the city. It's actually a very combustible brew, if you will, of federal, state, and city dollars. So, yes, we do get money. In terms of the details, I'm not privy to a lot of those, but I will say that one of the things I think I can bring to the table too, and especially with Senator Peterson and Delegate Bulba, is making sure we fight for our fair share. And you mentioned the fact that the city of Fairfax is at the heart of Northern Virginia to a large degree, at the heart of Fairfax, just in general. We should do everything we can to get even more dollars for our transportation, for economic development, because at the end of the day, people are going to be coming to our city, then we're passing through. We need to make sure we have a transportation system that works for the entire Northern Virginia region, since you do have people passing through. You've got people that are coming from Centerville, you have people that are coming from Loudoun County, you have people that are coming from Prince William, from the Occoquan area coming up. And so I want those people to come into the Fairfax City area and maybe sit a while, as they might like to say, or sit a spell, as my mother used to say. And so we want to make sure that when they come here, they know it's the city of Fairfax, but we also want them to be able to use a transportation system that works for them.
I know you wouldn't support this, but, with you controlling your own highways, you could put a toll booth on Fairfax Boulevard, solve all your economic development problems.
That is not going to be happening when I'm on city council.
Well, you talked about George Mason University. And, that's another big operation within, at least partially within the city. And are they good neighbors? I mean, how do you see the future of GMU relative to the city of Fairfax?
Let me just take a step back. If it wasn't for the city of Fairfax, there would be no George Mason University. It was the town of Fairfax actually donated the land for George Mason University to be constructed where it is now. And it is state property. Having said that, the city and George Mason University have had a sort of a back and forth relationship. And one of the things I want to do is I want to make sure that we embrace each other a little bit more. We need to be more of a town and gown community. I went to Old Dominion University and graduated from Old Dominion.
That's where my son went.
Old Dominion University. Good for him. He's a good old monarch. And one of the things that I think we can learn from the lessons from the city of Norfolk and Old Dominion is how they and city of Norfolk and Old Dominion started to learn and work together more closely. Because I lived in with my grandparents for a while in an established neighborhood called Edgewater down in Norfolk, and it was right by Old Dominion University, and they had some of the same sort of tensions that you find in some of the neighborhoods that are buttress George Mason University. Full disclosure, I live in one of those neighborhoods in Green Acres. And it wasn't until the city and the university really start to understand and what each other's needs were and how they could utilize that relationship that you saw it to flourish. And now Old Dominion University, since I left, is a gem.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
It is beautiful. A lot of the places that I visited when I was a student are no longer there anymore. And it looks great. They've got a great convocation center. They've got great housing. And I think we can find that balance because, look, the city of Fairfax is not only part of the regional economy, we're part of the world economy. We live, 20-some miles away from Dulles International Airport. We've got D.C., right next door to us. And we've got a world-class university at George Mason. We already do some great work with them. In fact, the Economic Development Authority has a great relationship with them. But at the same time, we need the university to understand that they are just as part of the community as we are part of their community. For example, some of the development that they're doing right now, I've got some heartburn over because instead of asking for our input, they're going out and telling us what they're going to do as opposed to asking us how can we better fit into the community as a whole. And those are the kind of things that we need to work on with them and for them to come to us first as opposed to come to us last. I've been to a good number of meetings. In fact, there's going to be another one coming up on March 12th to talk about the hotel and convention center that's being built at the corner of Braddock and Braddock and University, I believe. But at the same time, we need people to come and talk to us before they make the decisions and get our input. I would really like to see a revitalization of organizations that connect the city and the county and the university together so we can have that conversation. And I think there's some things we can do in the Old Town area to invite students and faculty to come down to the Old Town area. I mean, they really could be an economic powerhouse for the city. I don't think we're going to be a Madison, Wisconsin, or we're not going to be a college town anytime soon in that respect. But I remember when we had the Final Four, and we had a parade going down University Drive right by my house, and my kids were screaming and yelling. It was a lot of fun, and those are the kind of things we need to do more of. But we also need to strengthen the relationship. I'd certainly like to see a City of Fairfax resident get back on the Board of Visitors. We used to have one in Paige Johnson, a good friend of mine. I would like to see someone from the City of Fairfax to get back on the Board of Visitors. And I think we need to have more citizen participation within the university system. There are a lot of students that live in the city from a rental housing perspective, so we have to work on those issues as well. But we also have a lot of faculty and staff that live in the city, and they enjoy the amenities of the city. So I think that is something that we have to work on. The relationship, I wouldn't say is great, quite candidly. It's not great. It's okay. And it needs to be better because if it doesn't get better, then we're going to have a lot of tension going forward because the university is going to grow. And I'm encouraging it to grow, but I also want it to grow within the confines of the community. And I think if you talk to Supervisor Bulova, she would probably say the same thing because she also, in the Braddock district, she's got a border with them as well. And so we don't want another situation where you have just signs popping up and neighborhoods popping up at George Mason University, and you don't have the communities that are surrounding them that have been there, quite frankly, only they have, having tension with them. You want to work with them first, and then come to the decisions that need to be made about how best George Mason can fit with the community.
We have to take another break. We got a lot more to talk about with Dan Drummond, and we're going to all squeeze it into our next 15-minute segment. Stay with us, and we will see you back here in 2 minutes. Thanks for watching.
One day, I forgot to throw away my trash after lunch, but then I saw it later when I was playing in the woods. The next week, I went boating with my grandpa, and there it was. I tried to go swimming, but I couldn't because of my trash. And when I went fishing, well, you can guess what I caught that day. So now I always throw away my trash in the garbage can, where it belongs.
1 in 8 Americans goes hungry. One idea helped change that. A community started a garden that blossomed into farmers markets. 1 in 6 children lives in poverty. One group of women found an answer by opening a daycare center that their neighbors could afford. Today, 36 million Americans live in poverty, but one by one, people are helping themselves and each other to change the picture of poverty to one of hope. For easy ways you can help, visit povertyusa.org.
Every year, 250,000 Americans are diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
My fellow scientists and I are working on treatments and a cure for this deadly disease.
Millions of lives are at stake. Alzheimer's disease affects 1 in 3 families.
We're committed to uncovering the mystery of Alzheimer's.
And we're not going to quit until the job is done.
To find out more about Alzheimer's disease, call 1-800-437-2423.
Only through research will a cure be found.
James, don't forget your helmet.
Will do.
Not a helmet. Your bike helmet.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm James Thrash with the Washington Redskins. On the football field, a helmet is an important piece of equipment. I also wear another helmet that's just as important. A bike helmet. It's the most important piece of equipment you'll have the next time you're out on your bike. Wear yours and make sure your kids do too. Safety first with the Skins.
Now back to the Inside Scoop, Virginia. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, George Burke.
Welcome back. My guest today is Dan Drummond, candidate for Fairfax City Council. We've talked about a bunch of issues. Now we're going to get into a couple of them that are a little more involved. How would you shape Fairfax City government? If you had a magic wand and there were things that you could change or things that are right that you'd keep, what would you do?
Right.
If you, and I understand as a single member of the city council, you're not going to have even the mayor doesn't have the ability to reshape everything. But if you had that option, if you were able to do it, what would you do?
When I'm elected May 6th, I'm about bringing sea change to the city of Fairfax City Council and to city government. And when I say sea change, it stands for 3 things. It stands for smart, efficient, and accessible government. At the end of the day, it is local government that matters most to people on their day-to-day basis. You're not going to call the President of the United States, or you're going to call Governor Kane if you've got a street light that's out or you need your trash picked up. You're going to call your city government. We need to ensure that the services that are delivered to the citizens of Fairfax are delivered at the highest quality, because every single day people rely on us, whether it's our public safety, our fire, police, and rescue, which I strongly support with the grandfathers in law enforcement for nearly 50 years. We make sure we have safe streets, to whether it's the first-class arts and cultural activities we have. I want to bring to the city council the kind of action-oriented leadership that it deserves. Yes, I'm one of 6 members, and the mayor, who actually attended my kickoff and spoke a few kind words, which I'm very thankful for. He is the leader of the city, and I certainly want to work with him. And I think that's the key word, is work. We need to make sure that we are working for the citizens of Fairfax in a way that is productive and also uses their tax dollars in a smart manner, and keeping the tax burden fair. I also understand that politics is about the art of compromise. And I believe sometimes this city council has not necessarily tried to compromise as much as they've tried to score points on some things. And while I don't want to get into all the details here, I will say that there's some development issues, for example, where we didn't look for the compromise, but rather we looked to score political points. That's not what we need to do on city council or city government, because we can't mess around with rhetoric or hyperbole. We need to make sure that we produce results. I'm a results-oriented guy, I'm a pragmatic kind of guy, and at the end of the day, it's the citizens who are impacted by the decisions we make. And that's why I mentioned before, the details matter. Because if we don't have a city government that works for the people of Fairfax, and we're not the best managed government, then we're not going to be able to sell them on a vision of Fairfax Boulevard. We're not going to be able to sell them on a vision of what Old Town will look like. If they can't get their streets clean, which I'm not saying is happening, or if they can't get the kind of road improvements they need in their neighborhood, or if they feel like they've got cut-through traffic, or if they feel like they've got other little nagging issues that aren't being resolved, then we need to make sure that those are addressed. We also need to make sure we have openness and transparency. The city government, I think, does a pretty good job right now of reaching out. But one of the things that I've told voters when I've knocked on their door, and I'll tell them again tonight, is that when I'm on city council, I plan to have sessions at Main Street Bagel, at Sweet Life Cafe, and other places, once a month to come and hear your ideas, because it is the ideas from the people of Fairfax who are actually going to make this city different and make this city unique and move the city forward. The other thing is I want to make sure that we have a city, in terms of when I talk about shaping it, that really focuses on our zoning and our planning in terms of what we want for the city to look like for the long term. I mentioned before that decisions that we make need to be made for generations to come, not just for years to come in some cases. So I would probably take a closer look at granting variances where it involves historic properties or wetlands or other environmentally sensitive areas. I'd also look to find a way to get clarity from the citizens on what they want when we talk about open space versus green space. Because when we had the open space referendum about 8 years ago, the overwhelming majority of the city said they wanted to devote a certain percentage of their real estate taxes to go toward buying open space. But there is a question now, what does that mean? Does it mean we're buying green space where you have flora and fauna and trees and birds and all that sort of thing? Or are we buying open space that can be used at one point in time for ball fields? And so we need to have a conversation about that. My position there at this point is we need to find a balance between the two. I don't think we need to completely develop every single piece of open space. In fact, I think we need to preserve as much green space as possible, make sure we keep it within the context of what we want the city to look like for the long term. Because when we make development decisions, we have to understand that we're not just building a building, we're also building a quality of life for people too. And that is something that's very important. So when I'm on city council, I'm going to work as hard as I can to ensure that the quality of life people have is not just how they want it for today, but how they see it for tomorrow.
One of the things, you and I both are students of government and politics, and one of the things you said I thought was pretty interesting. The reality of the matter is that the job of an elected official is not just to win favor, is not just to win a popularity contest. Some of our best elected leaders nationally, locally, at the state and at the Commonwealth level, sometimes made very unpopular decisions that years later proved to be right. And certainly that doesn't say you do not seek citizens' input, et cetera. And sometimes you'll find on any issue there's two sides to it. You'll have citizens supporting it, you'll have citizens opposing it, and ultimately the decision rests on the shoulders of their elected officials. And if the decision is unpopular, you just pray that it's proved right at a later date. The other thing I wanted to get to was the budget. We've already heard the Board of Supervisors, Jerry Connolly, Board of Supervisors note there's going to have to be some belt tightening in Fairfax County. That's not a surprise. I mean, it's happening across the nation. We're seeing foreclosures. I don't think our rate in Northern Virginia is as high as it is in other locations. We're seeing credit tightening up. We're seeing prices rise. The cost of gasoline is putting an impact on people and on city and county budgets. You've got lots of vehicles. You got to gas up all the time. How do you see that impact affecting Fairfax City?
It's already impacting. We already were facing about a $2 million budget shortfall at a work session at a city council meeting for a couple of weeks ago where that was disclosed. And it caused some concern for me because already we're seeing this shortfall now. We haven't gotten to the budget, which is going to be presented March 11th. But one thing that I want to make sure that we don't do is we don't cut things and programs and policies that are special to the city. For example, there was on the table about $26,000 in funds that would be cut for a grant program to give to the neighborhood associations to use for their benefit for whether it's beautifying their neighborhood or events or block parties, that type of thing. That's very special. And when it gets out $26,000 that we got to cut, we need to reevaluate what our priorities are. To me, the priorities are going to be the schools, public safety, economic development, parks and recreation, and obviously general government services. And we need to make sure that those core services are delivered. And once we deliver those services, then we can talk about everything else that's on the table. But I do consider, for example, within the budget context, economic development Parks and Recreation should be considered. You know, Parks and Recreation is a huge issue for us. We've got a debate right now about whether or not we build a community center. We recently got a $5 million gift from the Sherwood family to build a community center. It's probably going to cost a lot more than that. So how do we build that without increasing our debt levels? Because that's something that we need to have to really build the city, bring the city together. We've been talking about it for 40 some odd years. It's finally time to do it. How we do it, it's going to be up to this council and the next council, but more importantly, it's up to the community how we do it. Secondly, when it comes to the budget, we need to make sure that we keep taxes fair. And when I mean that, I mean that we ensure that the tax rate is such that it's equitable across the board. And one of the best way to do that, again, is to ensure that we have investments that are being made within the business sector so they can increase their output and their productivity, and so that we have more people coming to the city and eating at our restaurants and shopping in our shops, because that will encourage economic growth. And by encouraging that economic growth, that will ensure that the tax base is spread out. The one other thing that I think is important too is the city has a great reputation for its history and for its environmental resources, and we do need to make investments there to protect them. And you know, one thing I don't want to see have happen is I don't want to see you know, us cutting maintenance budgets, for example, of historic facilities, which if they go in disrepair will cost more to repair later on.
And they're irreplaceable.
They are irreplaceable.
We're at a time where I always try to give the candidate an opportunity to speak directly to the voters. So I'm going to give you about a minute, maybe a minute and a half, try to keep it to that, and tell the voters why they should vote for you and ask them for their vote.
Thank you, George. And I want to thank you again for having me on the show tonight. The city of Fairfax is a unique historic place. It's got small town charm that you can't find nearly anywhere else in Northern Virginia. It's a place where its quality of life is surpassed by no other. And I want to make sure that we ensure that quality of life is for generations to come. The decisions I make will not be made for the short term, but for the long term. And I want to bring sea change to local government. That means smart, effective, and accessible government, where you feel that your elected officials are listening to you and they're seeking your counsel, and that your input and your ideas are being reflected in the policies that we have to take upon as a city council. I want to make sure that the city that you have is run well and it's managed well, because again, at the end of the day, you're making an investment with your tax dollars in this city. So on May 6, 2008, I ask that you vote for Dan Drummond for City of Fairfax Council. And please go to my website, which is danforfairfax.com. You can also email me at dan@danforfairfax.com, or you can call me, 703-268-0541. That's on my BlackBerry phone. It's on my BlackBerry, so I'm always accessible. And please, if you're in the city, I hope you consider putting up a yard sign as well. So call me and I'll get one right to your yard. And thank you so much again for having me tonight. And thank you, and I look forward to talking with you in the city of Fairfax.
Dan, it was a pleasure to have you tonight. I think we had an interesting discussion. I learned a little bit about Fairfax City. I wish you the best of luck in May. For those who are watching, I think they got a good picture of who you are and why you're running. You're a young man. You got plenty of time to make some real change in Fairfax City, and I hope you do. So on behalf of the crew and myself, we thank you for watching tonight, and good night.